Hi everyone, Jean Lurson here. I thought I would show you a very quick video on how I get very thin lines on my paintings. For instance, here where I painted some pickets with the barbed wire going through the wood. For this I used a nib pen dipped in watercolor, and that's how you get these very fine lines, and it's one of the few ways that I know to get very fine lines. I actually have subsequently bought myself a much better nib pen, and I'll put the name and link to where you can get this on Amazon below the video if you're interested. This seems to hold more paint, and I can probably do a whole section without having to add more paint to the nib. This is called a Takikawa. I mean, the difference in using these two is really chalk and cheese. I didn't think one really needed a slightly more expensive nib pen, but it really does pay to have this rather than this less expensive one. What I also use this for is signing my name on my watercolors with watercolor, because if you've ever entered an exhibition, you'll know that a pure watercolor exhibition, that your painting won't be accepted if you sign with anything but watercolors. I make a practice of using watercolor to sign my name, and I can get really nice crisp thin lines with this. So that's how I did that painting, and also this one with the picket fence there. And I used that also for these thin lines in the cliff in this painting. Another way to do thin lines, like if you're doing grasses, is I painted my dark surface, which was the grasses, and then I just took the very sharp edge of an old credit card, and before it dried, when it was not quite as wet, I just scraped with the edge of this, scraped the lines through that. That's another way to get sharp lines. Now for this painting, which is part of my watercolor course on painting wild fennel in watercolors, for these fine lines, which were masked out before I did any painting, I used this, I think it's called a ruling pen, and architects use it. But you see this little thing on the top here, you can adjust the size for your line, and I'm going to demonstrate all three of these. I just wanted to show you how I use these. Now for my fall painting, and I've done about 6 of these, and every time I do them they sell right away. I used my number 1 rigor brush, and I think you can also get a 0, but this is a very fine line rigor brush. This one's by Princeton, and Princeton is synthetic brushes, but they're one of the few synthetic brushes that actually hold a lot of water, and I really like them. I use them often. I use different sizes in the Princeton. I used the rigor brush for doing these very fine dark branches that come off the birch trees. I hope you can see them there. I'm not one of those believers that you have to have the sable brushes. And this painting, again, I used the nib pen to get these fine lines on the dandelion heads. And just one more. Again, I did with my rigor brush, I did some fine grass lines, and then when it was almost dry, I took my sharp credit card edge and went through it just to make it a little more three-dimensional. I think you can see that there. So now I'm going to show you how I did all these. Let's start off with the nib pen. Now with the nib pen, your paint shouldn't be too thin. Actually, what I'm putting on right now is a fairly thin paint, but I'm going to just try. Oh, you see, this is lovely. And you can't get thin lines like that really any other way. Isn't that lovely? That's how thin you can go. Now I'm going to take the ruling pen and dip that in my watercolor and see it's slightly thicker, but I can actually make this even tighter. I think it goes a little tighter. Let's see. Yeah, it's slightly thinner lines. So if you want very thin, that's with the nib pen. This is the ruling pen. Kind of like I like this for twigs on branches. And now I'm going to do the rigor brush, number 1 rigor brush, and just wipe it off. And see, I can get quite nice, very nice thin lines too. And it just depends on what type of painting I'm doing. If I do a tree and then I want some smaller branches, I'd probably use this more than this or the ruling pen. It just seems to work better for that type of thing. But the thinner the line you need, you could go to the nib pen. And now let's see, I'm going to mix some burnt sienna and French ultramarine. This is where I would take the number 1 rigor you have to just wait enough time for it to start soaking into the paper but not be dry. Let's try if we can do this now. Yeah, see, just to get that three-dimensional look, I'm taking this sharp edge of the credit card and getting some really nice grasses which look like the light's been shining on it, or the sun or the moon. That's just basically how I get thin lines in my paintings, and I thought this may be of help to you. If you enjoyed this little demonstration of how to get thin lines in your paintings, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.